Welcome to the Amplified Podcast Reloaded. Groundwork Ohio is a committed, nonpartisan public policy, research, and advocacy organization where we focus on the time when children's experiences and environments most influence their health development and life trajectory from birth to age 5. Our vision: that Ohio is the best place to be a young child, and every child has the opportunity to reach their full potential. Well, hello, and thank you so much for joining us for Groundwork Ohio's Amplified Podcast Reloaded. This is the first episode of the year, and we are excited to be joined by Dr. Kristi Hannan as well as Raya Anderson for a very timely conversation centered on early intervention. My name is Vanessa Butler. I have the pleasure of serving as Groundwork Ohio's Senior Director of Community Relations. And so we will go ahead and get started with our guest by a few bios and introductions. So Raya Anderson is a dynamic and mission-driven community leader with over 2 decades of experience advancing early childhood education, family advocacy, and student success across Ohio. She is a recognized public speaker and policy voice, known for elevating parent perspectives and statewide conversations on equity, access, and education reform. And her expertise includes program leadership, family engagement, legislative advocacy, and strategic collaboration with government and nonprofit entities. She's also well versed in several federal funding systems, so TANF, Title I, and is passionate about building inclusive systems that support economically disadvantaged and vulnerable student populations. Dr. Kristi Hannan is the Associate Director of Early Childhood at Lucas County Family First Council in Toledo, Ohio. She has worked in the field of early childhood for 40 years in roles that includes teaching young children, university teaching, academic research, family policy, and program administration. For the past 23 years, she has led several publicly funded prenatal to 3 programs in Lucas County, including home visiting, early intervention, central intake and referral, as well as early Head Start. And for the past year, she has overseen the Safe Babies Project, an initiative of 0 to 3 in Lucas County with the support of the community coordinator and state team. Welcome, Raya and Dr. Hannan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Raya, I want to start with you today. Kind of kick us off with talking about what your why is and when was the moment you decided to be a champion in the early intervention space?
Okay. Well, again, thank you for having me. My why is my son, Amir. I got Amir when he was 2 months old through a non relative kinship placement, and he is the reason I do everything.
Hmm.
He is the reason I keep striving for better and better, not just for myself and for him, but also for other children. I decided, and the moment I became an advocate for early intervention is when he was about 2 years old and we noticed some developmental delays. And his teachers came to me. And at first I was, didn't want to hear it. I thought, if you nurtured a child enough, it would solve everything. That was just the place I knew, but that wasn't true. And so once I accepted the help, I knew that the things I didn't know, I was going to try my best to make sure other parents knew and knew there was nothing wrong with accepting help, accepting early intervention, because at the end of the day, it's about our children
That's
and
right.
doing what's best for them. So as parents, we have to get over what we have standing in our way and just help our children. And so that's when I decided I was going to become a champion for life and to help other families get over what they perceive as the stereotypes or hurdles.
That is such an important call in for our parents and caregivers that will be listening to this episode. So accepting the help is that theme, Raya. Thank you so much. I want to turn to you, Dr. Hannan. Do you want to share your why and when was the moment you decided to become a champion in this space?
Thanks, Vanessa. I'd like to just tag on to what Raya said. My why is also what's best for the children. My current why in my position is being able to impact the lives of hundreds of children and families in our community and even statewide every year. When I was a teacher and an administrator, I was able to impact a classroom of children or college students or possibly a childcare center. But now I'm able to work with larger systems and really impact more children in a more indirect way as an administrator. So I became a champion for EI when I started realizing that the lack of state and federal investments in early intervention year after year were really impacting our ability at the local level to recruit and retain our service coordinators and to cover the full cost of providing early intervention to all the children in our community. This was resulting in high turnover among our staff, high caseloads, and really impacting our ability to meet all of the requirements of the program. So a group of EI leaders from across the state started having conversations with state leaders, Groundwork Ohio, and even our legislators to educate everyone about EI, the benefits to children and families, and what we really need to provide a high quality system of service. So the good news is that all of this, along with other advocacy efforts, resulted in nearly a $15.2 million increase in what came in to our program statewide.
Thank you so much for that context, Dr. Hannan. I want to still stick with you for this next question. Someone who may not be situated as Raya in present day, maybe think of Raya when she first gave birth to Amir and just discovering that this might be an area to explore for her child. How do you go about explaining early intervention to a parent or a caregiver who is hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah, our early childhood systems can be so complicated. So we really try to have a clear message for our families and encourage them to get involved as early as possible for the benefit of their child. So I would say that EI is a system of services and it builds the parent's capacity to support their own child's development in the context of the everyday people and places and activities that make up their life with their children. So our service providers are a little different than if you go to, let's say, speech therapy or physical therapy in your community. Our providers act as coaches with the parent so they can help the parents learn strategies that work for them in their own home and during their everyday activities. So we focus on building the child and the family's strengths. So we really try to come from that strength-based approach. And we base our work on the parents' priorities for their child. So we as providers may assess some issues that we see in the child, but it's really about what the parent wants to prioritize that makes up our work.
That's helpful. Raya, do you mind sharing what you remember most about your very first contact or visit with an EI team?
Yes, ma'am. So again, Amir was about 2 years old when they called me in for a parent conference, and they had the excuse me, the educational support specialist, Amir's teachers, and they were telling me the things that they saw and that they were, a little concerning. But the thing I remember most is they reassured me that it wasn't about my parenting. There was nothing I had done wrong or neglected with him.
Sure.
It was just something that needed to be tackled. And that helped me as a parent be able to accept the referral, to accept the help. Again, focusing back on Amir. And so I think it's all the way around people also approach the subject with parents. And that's very important that when we're speaking to parents, that we come from a place of caring and understanding and wanting to help and not judgment. Because the judgment will put up a barrier and a wall that is very hard to break down later. And so I think what helped me was that they came from this place of loving and caring about my child and letting me know from the beginning, we value you as a parent. We see you as a parent. You did nothing wrong. How can we help you? How can we help your child? And that makes all the difference in how a parent is going to perceive that. And then they're more willing to accept the help as I was.
That's so good. I want to ask the both of you, why is inclusive childcare important, especially in today's climate?
Yeah, do you want to start with that, Raya?
Sure. It's to be inclusive because a lot of times our children with these differences, and I don't like using disabilities, I use differences, already can feel isolated and they can already feel alone and that they don't fit in. So inclusivity is very important so that they get still that full childhood experience. With my son, it came in that we do that through sports, where he
Hmm.
gets to be on, a team with his peers and learning the same skills they are. Because in school, he is in a self-contained room with others, but it's important for me to make sure he's still getting that full approach and that he's integrated into a full life because they start to know, the older they get, the more they start to notice the differences. It's important that we remind them that they're still children and that they still will have successes and failures just like everyone else, just like every other kid. And when we involve them in those other activities, they get to see that for themselves.
Dr. Hannan?
I agree with everything that Rhea just said. I would add that inclusive childcare also means that every staff member is fully equipped to work with all children, regardless of differences. And in fact, quality early learning is about individualizing to each child. And so whether you have an identified delay or disability or individualization is part of what good teaching is all about. So I would just add that piece around teachers having enough training and experience and confidence to work with all the children who come into their care.
I love that the emphasis on individualization. Can we talk, Dr. Hannan, a little bit more specifically about what an individualized family service plan is for families that may not be familiar? And then further, how do you involve families in setting goals? It is known as the IFSP. How do you involve families in setting goals for the IF so that outcomes are functional and tied to real life?
Yes, that's a really great question. So, a lot of people may be familiar with the IEP that some
Yes.
students are getting in school once they start preschool or kindergarten or later. So, the IFSP is the plan for children younger than 3 who are in early intervention. And there are a few differences from the IEP. The first one I would say is an IFSP, as you noticed, has family in the
Yeah,
title of the plan.
that's
And
right.
so it's written for the whole family. And in fact, you might have a child goal, but you could also have a family goal on an IFSP. And so the family goal might be something related to what the parent wants to learn to be able to do or increase their knowledge so they have a better ability to meet their own child's needs. And then child goals, I think we're more familiar with, where we're going to develop goals around what will help the child more fully participate in family life, in childcare, in the community, wherever they go in their day-to-day life. Another thing that's really different is we are looking at the child's whole life. So the IEP is looking at how a student functions in the educational setting with their peers. We're looking at how the infant or toddler is functioning at home, childcare, everywhere they go. So we're taking a more holistic perspective, and that's just baked into what early intervention is. So, how we involve families is the very first context with families. We're talking about what are your resources that you have that we might be able to utilize to support your plan. We're talking about their concerns. So, what are the things you're most concerned about your child right now? And what are your priorities? So, what do you want to focus on, and how can we help you? We're also asking them about their child's daily routines, the child's health, their development, and we're asking for the parents' observations. So we're not just doing our own observations during assessments, but what are you seeing day to day and what your child is able to do at home and away from home? So this becomes the foundation for setting goals that are really meaningful to that family and strategies that the family is able to carry out at home or other places that don't require special materials or equipment.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hannan, especially kind of laying out, kind of the factors and questions that really involve and include families into the process and the care of their child or children. Yeah, I want to ask you, in your interactions with an early intervention team and coordinator, what were the factors that were important to you as a parent in considering the care for your son Amir?
I think one of my top priorities was diversity, not just diversity amongst the staff, but also the student population, because I wanted him to, again, be in a environment and surroundings where there were children from different backgrounds, different social statuses, coming with all differences in the room. I also looked for high quality teachers and directors that understood uh, his differences and were open and able to talk about how they could help accommodate Amir and make him successful.
Thank you. Raya, were there any specific challenges you faced in getting or keeping services? So
The only challenge I really encountered was not when he was in the early intervention age group. It's when he started to transition, when he transitioned, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, to kindergarten, and you saw those services change from early childhood and from Head Start to now the traditional school setting. And
okay,
so some of those services that we have in early childhood really do well being implemented in the K through 12 world, because
okay.
I feel like once they get the K through 12 world, it changes so much and the ball is kind of dropped at where they're at on this early intervention and working with the whole family.
Yeah.
And that's where I had the difficulty. While we were in that early intervention, early Head Start childcare world, the services were phenomenal. If we could replicate those services for other age groups,
Mm.
that would be the direction I would hope.
Dr. Hannan, that's a great segue to my next question for you. I mean, you heard a little bit from Rhea about her personal transitioning from into more school-based aged, and so wanted to hear from you. How does you and your team support families as their children approach age 3 and transition from Part C services to school-based services under Part B?
That can be a really emotional time for all parents, is thinking about sending their young toddler off to preschool. And if you have a child who has developmental differences, you may have additional concerns.
Sure.
Like, will my child be understood by the teacher, by other children? Do they have to be potty trained to be in preschool? And how do the teachers handle behaviors that might be really challenging for us at home or at childcare? So one of the things we do is start those transition conversations very early in early intervention. So we're not waiting until the child is almost 3. That should be an ongoing conversation from the time the family starts early intervention all the way through. The second thing we do is we put a formal plan in place somewhere around 2.5. We start adding a transition outcome to the IFSP that we just talked about. So that outcome is really, what does the family want to see to make that transition as smooth as possible for the child, but also for themselves. And so we include things like exploring what options there are for preschool in your community, touring a center or a school to see what it looks like, and supporting the child's development, like their communication skills. So outcomes, again, are individualized and really based on what the parent wants to see. If the parent gives consent, we can include the school district in that planning process so they can be at the table talking directly about the preschool, special education, and other early childhood services that the district offers. And that way, the parent can ask them questions and express concerns about that transition with the school representatives also. Our formal plan has to be in place,
Yeah.
but no later than 3 months before the 3rd birthday.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit, Dr. Hannan, about what do you believe the state policy areas that could stand for improvement when it comes to inclusive childcare?
Yeah, I love this question. I think, state policy has come a long way in the 23 years that I've been doing this role,
Oh,
but we still have ways to go.
yeah.
And I would say for providers to be able to deliver high quality, inclusive childcare, they really need stability. They need stable funding, such as reimbursing publicly funded childcare based on enrollment instead of attendance. And I know there's a lot of conversations about that right now, both at the state and federal level, increasing eligibility for publicly funded childcare and things like that that really help stabilize funding. But it also means providing enough funding to ensure that childcare professionals are earning a professional wage and getting the benefits that other educators get when they're working in school systems. Childcare providers don't make the same salaries that public school teachers do, and they don't get the same benefits. So it's very hard to recruit teachers and to keep them in the childcare system. So once you have stable funding and a stable workforce, you can really get to quality for inclusion of all children.
Thank you, Dr. Hannan. Raya, what would you tell them early intervention made possible for Amir and your family?
I would definitely tell them that early intervention made it possible for me to be able to communicate and understand my child. And as a parent, there's nothing more frustrating than not understanding or feel like you're not getting your child and you don't understand their perspective and what they're going through. And so one of the great things I'm truly happy with early intervention is it was about Amir, but it wasn't just about him. It was also how and looked at the family dynamic of how do we communicate? This is the signs he's telling me. This is what's going on. And through his intervention services, I learned to communicate with him.
You
I learned, sign language and what he meant for different things until he was able to verbalize what he needed and what he wanted to say.
sure.
And without those, I can't imagine if I could have continued down that road being frustrated and him equally frustrated with the communication and the and the understanding gap. And that's important for policymakers that we have to start this because the whole goal, I feel, in early intervention is to really put these kids in an area where they're equitable to their peers.
Yes,
And that's most important. So if it takes more funding, then that's what we need to do. Because when we don't do those things, if I'd waited till he was 5 to get that help and communication with him and interventions, how much further back would he be?
that's right. That's right. For Dr. Hannan and for Raya, we transitioning. So we talked a little bit about, how what would we say directly to policymakers if you're talking to other advocates, what is the one thing you would tell advocates for young children and families to communicate to policymakers?
I would first tell the parent to and advocates to find the way that is best for you to communicate. Some people can get up and they can talk, they can give great speeches and they can really move people. Others are fantastic writers. So I would advise families and advocates to find their voice and the field that their voice is going to be best used for them. I know some wonderful writers. I am not one of those who can write wonderful letters and tell their story in word form that is beautiful and moving. And so I think it's important that we need to find the best way for each advocate to advocate and communicate with policymakers because it does no one any good to get someone who's not comfortable speaking, though they can work on it and get better, putting them in a crowd of a bunch of legislators where that may not be their strength.
That's good.
And so I think it's important that we find where their voice can be best utilized.
Thank you, Raya. What about you, Dr. Hannan?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, Rhea, and add that once you find the best way to use your voice, also use your unique perspective based on the needs of young children and families
Mhm.
in your experience in your community to find that thing that you're passionate about and advocate for that. That's going to make you much more effective and compelling to policymakers if you have your passion behind it. There's so many things to advocate for that help kids and families from whether it's quality childcare, early intervention, infant early childhood mental health, lead prevention, so many topics that we do need advocacy around. Pick something and do that thing. Keep it up over time and don't give up because it really does make a difference.
Yes, it does.
Absolutely. I want to close our conversation with just one final question. It is a question that we ask everyone. So Rhea, we'll start with you and then we'll transition out to Dr. Hannan. Please describe a scene from your vision of the future for Ohio's youngest children and their caregivers.
The first and foremost is universal childcare and universal early childcare because no parent should have to choose between working and getting their child in a quality program. And that is a burden that a lot of families can't afford childcare and can't take advantage of these early intervention services. And if we could remove that barrier, wow, the change we could see in Ohio's children. If we got all the kids who needed the help they needed into early childhood education. So that's my first and foremost. It would take so much burden and pressure off of families and single parents like myself to know that they can go to work and know their child is being taken care of, educated, and getting any intervention services they need. So that's my scene. That will always be my scene. And even though my son isn't in that age group anymore,
Mhm.
it's still important because I know how important it was for my son, and I want that for other children.
Absolutely. Dr. Hannan.
Yeah, in the future, I see young children in their homes, in early learning settings, and in the community being kept safe and loved and valued by all the adults in the community who see all children is our children, regardless of difference, race, ethnicity, economic status, or family structure. The parents and the other caregivers and professionals who care for those children have all the knowledge and skills and resources that they need to be able to provide the very best care, and that those adults are valued and well compensated themselves. I also see policymakers who assess the impact of any proposed policy based not only on economic and environmental and business impacts like they do today, but also on what are the potential impacts on the well-being of children and of families.
Well, that is such a great way to conclude this conversation. I want to thank Raya Anderson and Dr. Kristi Hannan so much for joining us for this conversation. Please remember, if you care for or love a young child in Ohio, you are an expert and your voice matters. Amplify your voice by sharing your own story, supporting others, and sharing their stories, and advocate for changes that will support families and young children in your communities. Please also rate, review, and subscribe to the Amplified Podcast Reloaded on the Groundwork Ohio's YouTube channel. If you wish to engage with Groundwork Ohio to amplify your voice and support policies to improve the lives of Ohio's youngest children, please visit www.groundworkohio.org. Until next time.